Here it is, my book.
Wow, it's beautiful. Congratulations to both of you.
I couldn't have done it without your inspiration.
I'm honored, truly, to new beginnings.
Thank you so much. It was incredible.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You must be exhausted. Here.
Thank you. This is very kind. To the chef.
Look at that sweaty barbecue chef. How did he even get in?
The rich elites at this Atlanta party snickered when the sweaty barbecue chef stepped out, but they had absolutely no idea he was richer than all of them combined.
3 weeks before Claire humiliated him, Liam was just a chef, but now a high-powered New York lawyer just told him he inherited a $140 billion real estate empire with one terrifying catch.
The cheating ex-girlfriend thought she destroyed the barbecue boyfriend's life until he stepped onto that stage and revealed his real title. Chairman of the $140 billion company that owned everything she desired. She tried to return when he was powerful, but Liam Carter just proved that the man who walks out of the kitchen with integrity is the only kind of rich man worth becoming.
The linen partition swung aside. Liam Carter stepped out in his chef's coat, still smelling of 9 hours behind the grill. He was working at Atlanta's most expensive engagement party that spring. Then he saw her. Claire Whitmore in white silk holding the arm of Ryan Sterling, the city's youngest real estate millionaire. Liam walked toward her. Before he could speak, Claire laughed loud enough for every guest to hear. "You're a man who's going to spend his whole life inside a kitchen." Nobody in that garden knew the chef she had humiliated was richer than all of them combined. 3 weeks before the engagement party, Liam Carter opened his small barbecue restaurant on Edgewood Avenue the same way he had opened it every morning for the last 7 years. He turned the key, switched on the floor lights, and walked back to the smoker to start the brisket before the first customer arrived. The place was called Carter's. The sign outside was faded. The booths were vinyl, and the smell that lived inside the walls was older than the lease. He was 34 years old and he cooked everything himself. Margaret Doyle, who had worked the front counter for the last 5 years, called him Liam to his face and boss. Only when reporters from the local food magazines came by. They came less often than they used to. Atlanta was changing. The new money on the north side liked tasting menus and bottle service. A man in a smoke-stained apron pulling brisket from a steel barrel did not photograph well anymore. Liam did not mind. He had built the place after his wife died, and the kitchen had been the only room in his life that did not feel empty. He worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And on Sundays he drove out to the farm south of the city to pick up whatever was fresh. He paid his bills. He paid Maggie. He had stopped wanting more years ago. What he had instead for almost a decade was Claire Whitmore. They had met at a community college night class in 2015. She had been 21 then, with a borrowed coat and a notebook full of plans. She wanted to sell luxury homes one day. She wanted her name in the papers. She wanted a life that did not include the trailer park she had grown up in. Liam believed in her from the first conversation. And for the next 7 years he carried her through every version of failure that came before the success. He drove for a ride-share company on his nights off so she could pay her real estate licensing fees. He covered her rent the year she tried to start her own brokerage and failed. He held her hand when investors laughed her out of meetings. He told her again and again that she was going to make it. And in 2022 she did. Whitmore Properties signed its first 8-figure listing and her photo ran in the Atlanta Business Chronicle. That was the year she stopped answering his calls at night. The dinners moved later. The cancellations started. By the spring of this year she had stopped coming home altogether. Liam told himself she was busy. He told himself a lot of things he no longer believed. The job came through his catering line on a Tuesday. A coordinator from a private events firm wanted a high-end barbecue station for a black tie engagement party at the Swan House. 200 guests, top fee, no questions asked. The coordinator did not say whose engagement it was. And Liam did not ask. He needed the money. He spent 4 days on the menu, drove out to Cherokee County to pick up the pork himself, and polished his own knives the night before. On the night of the party he loaded the van alone, drove across town and set up his station behind a row of white linen partitions in the garden. The estate looked like a movie set. Strings of warm bulbs hung between the oak trees. A jazz quartet played near the fountain. Champagne moved through the crowd on silver trays. Liam worked the grill for 9 hours and never saw the guests. He smelled their cologne when the wind shifted and heard their laughter rise and fall, but the partitions kept him out of sight. That was the deal. The food was elegant. The chef was invisible. Around 11 o'clock, the coordinator pulled the partition aside and asked him to come out and accept a thank you from the host. Liam wiped his hands on a clean towel, took off his apron and stepped through into the garden. He saw Claire first. She was standing near the fountain in a white silk dress, a glass of champagne in her left hand, her right resting on the arm of a tall blonde man in a tailored navy suit. Liam recognized the man from the magazine covers. Ryan Sterling, 36 years old, the youngest principal at the Sterling Group, the second largest real estate firm in the Southeast, the man whose father owned half of Buckhead. Liam stopped walking. He could feel the heat coming off his own face. He had not seen Claire in 9 weeks. She had told him she was traveling for work. She had told him they needed time to think. She saw him now and for a second her smile did not change. Then it did. It became smaller and harder. And the woman who had once cried in his car the night her first brokerage failed was gone from her eyes entirely. The coordinator, who did not understand what was happening, walked Liam forward and introduced him as the chef of the evening. There was polite applause. Ryan Sterling extended a hand, his grip firm and his eye contact brief, and thanked him for the work. Liam shook the hand without looking at it. He was watching Claire. The question had been sitting in his mouth since he stepped through the partition and he could not hold it anymore. "Fiancé?" he asked. The garden quieted in pieces. The guests closest to them turned first. Claire's smile froze then sharpened. "Liam, this is not the time," she said low and tight. He did not raise his voice. He simply did not move. The coordinator looked between them and took a small step back. Claire set her glass down on the rim of the fountain and straightened her spine the way she used to when she was about to walk into a meeting she expected to lose. Only this time she was not about to lose everyone. She said loud enough that the jazz quartet stopped playing on its own. "I'm sorry for the interruption. This is Liam Carter. He runs a little barbecue place over on Edgewood. We used to know each other." A few guests laughed, uncertain. Ryan Sterling did not laugh. He was watching Liam now and his face had gone very still. "We didn't just know each other, Claire." Liam said. His voice was quiet and even, and it carried farther than hers had. "We were together for almost 10 years. The laughter died. Claire tilted her head, her eyes very bright. "We were friends," she said, "once a long time ago before I grew up." She looked around the garden at all the cameras and the champagne and the warm bulbs in the oak trees, and her smile became something Liam had never seen on her face before. "You're sweet, Liam, but let's be honest in front of everyone. You're a man who's going to spend his whole life inside a kitchen." "I'm not. I never was." Nobody in the garden spoke. Liam looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once very slightly, the way a man nods when he is filing something away inside himself for later. He turned around and walked back through the partitions to his station. He took off his second apron and folded it. He told Maggie to finish breaking down without him. He got into the van and drove home. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning when he reached the house. The porch light was on a timer. The kitchen smelled like the coffee he had forgotten to clean out that morning. He sat down at the table without turning on the overhead light, stared at the wall and did not cry. He had used up that part of himself somewhere on the interstate. The call came at 117. The number was a Boston area code. And the man on the other end identified himself as Daniel Hayes, attorney for the estate of Walter Carter. Liam did not place the name for a moment. Walter Carter was a face from A Single Christmas in 1996. A tall, quiet man who had handed him a pocket knife and disappeared back into a black town car before dinner. Walter was his father's older brother. He had cut ties with the family after a fight Liam was never told the details of. He had moved north and become in the gaps left by silence a kind of myth. Daniel Hayes spoke carefully. He said that Walter Carter had passed away 3 days earlier from a long illness and that Walter had named his nephew Liam Carter of Atlanta, Georgia as the sole heir to his estate. Liam closed his eyes. He thought it was a scam. He was about to hang up. Then Daniel Hayes said the number. The estate consisted, in addition to several private residences and controlling personal interests in 2 foundations, of full ownership of Sterling Horizon Group, a privately held holding company with operations in commercial real estate, hospitality, logistics, and energy. The current valuation audited the previous quarter was approximately $140 billion. The kitchen was very quiet. "I understand this is a lot to take in," Daniel Hayes said. "I'd like to fly down tomorrow and meet you in person." Mr. Carter left specific instructions, and I think it's important you hear them before you make any decisions. Liam said, yes, hung up, and sat at the table for another hour before he stood. The lawyer arrived the next afternoon. He came alone in a charcoal suit carrying a black leather case. They sat in the back booth of Carter after the lunch rush. Maggie brought them coffee and stayed out of earshot. Daniel Hayes opened the case, laid out 3 folders and set a single sealed envelope on top of them. Before we go through the assets, he said, your uncle asked me to read you this. He wrote it himself about 6 months ago when he knew he was running out of time. He broke the seal and read aloud. The letter was short. Walter Carter wrote that he had watched his nephew from a distance for many years. He wrote that he had never made his own peace with the world he had built because the world he had built had cost him almost everything that mattered. He wrote that he was leaving everything to Liam because Liam of all the Carters had grown up poor and stayed kind. Then he wrote the condition. Liam Carter would have 90 days. During those 90 days he would be installed as chairman of Sterling Horizon Group. He would have full executive authority. He would have access to every account, every property, every contract. He could use them however he wished. But if at any point during those 90 days he used the company's power to humiliate, ruin, or take revenge on another human being, the inheritance would be revoked. Every asset would pass instead to the 2 foundations and Liam would walk away with nothing. The judgment would be made by Daniel Hayes acting as the executive based on conduct rather than outcome. The letter was specific on this point. Walter Carter did not care if Liam built or sold or merged. He cared whether the boy who had been kind when he was poor stayed kind when he was rich. Daniel Hayes folded the letter and looked at Liam across the table. You don't have to decide tonight, he said. But the clock starts the moment you sign. Liam looked down at his hands. His knuckles were still red from the grill the night before. He thought about Claire's face in the garden, the way her smile had become small and hard. He thought about the laughter that had started and then stopped. He thought about $140 billion and what a man could do in 90 days with that kind of weight in his hands. He set the contract aside and told Daniel he would meet him at the 4 Seasons in the morning to sign. The clock started on a Wednesday morning in late April. Liam signed the documents in Daniel Hayes' hotel suite at the 4 Seasons in Atlanta. And by the time he walked back to the elevator, he was the chairman of a company with 40,000 employees on 3 continents. Daniel handed him a black phone and an unmarked envelope containing the access codes. He said the company plane was waiting at Decal Peachtree. He said the first board meeting would be the following morning. And after that, Liam was on his own. The 90-day count would be silent. Daniel would observe. Liam went home first. He packed 2 suits he had bought for funerals, a worn duffel bag, and the pocket knife his uncle had once handed him as a child. He drove to Carter at 5 o'clock in the morning, opened the back door and walked through the empty kitchen one more time. Maggie came in at 6 o'clock and found him sitting at the counter in a suit. He told her simply that he had to be out of town for a while, that the payroll was funded for 6 months in an account she would now have signing authority on, and that he needed her to keep the place running. She did not ask why. She had known him for 5 years and she had learned not to press. The Sterling Horizon Group headquarters were not in Atlanta. The company was incorporated in Delaware, headquartered in a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan, and operated quietly across the country. Liam landed at Teterboro that afternoon. A car took him into the city. The lobby of the tower had 40-foot ceilings and brushed steel, and the man waiting for him by the security desk was a senior vice president named Howard Bell, who had served his uncle for 19 years. Howard did not hide his disbelief. He looked at the cuff of Liam's suit, which was A/4 and too long, and at the wear pattern on the heel of his shoes. He greeted him with formal politeness and led him up to the executive floor. In the boardroom the next morning, 12 senior officers waited around a long walnut table. Liam introduced himself, said he was here to learn before he was here to lead, and asked each of them to walk him through their division. 3 of them did not bother to hide their smiles. One of them, a regional president named Carl Bradford, opened his laptop and answered emails for half the meeting. Liam asked at the end of each presentation the kind of question a man who had run a small business for 7 years asks. He wanted to know what each division spent on labor, what its margins looked like by quarter, where it lost money it should not have lost. The questions were not sophisticated. They were specific. Several of the officers who had spent the last decade insulating themselves with jargon found themselves answering more directly than they were comfortable answering. Carl Bradford did not look up from his laptop until the third hour when Liam asked him a question he could not deflect. He answered badly. He never opened the laptop again. By the end of the first week, 2 divisional heads had quietly leaked to financial reporters that the new chairman was, in the words of one anonymous source, a backwoods barbecue cook from Georgia who couldn't read a balance sheet if you printed it on a menu. The line ran in a column the next morning. Liam read it in the back of a town car on his way to a closing in Houston. He did not respond. He went to the closing, listened for 2 hours, asked 4 questions that none of the lawyers had thought to ask, and signed the deal at a price $3 million below the original ask. Howard Bell, sitting beside him, said nothing in the car afterward. But he stopped smiling at the cuff of Liam's suit. In the weeks that followed, Liam developed a routine he kept regardless of which city he was working in. He woke at 5. He read the previous day's closing reports before sunrise. He took every meeting where the people across the table believed they knew more than he did. And he let them keep believing it until the 3rd or 4th question. He fired no one in the first month. He promoted no one. He listened. Howard Bell, who had watched 2 interim chairmen come and go before Liam, started taking notes in the meetings Liam ran. He had not done that for anyone since Walter. Back in Atlanta, Claire Whitmore and Ryan Sterling were everywhere. Their faces ran on the cover of the May issue of Atlanta under the headline, "The New Aristocracy." The piece described their wedding plans, their Buckhead estate, and the charity gala they would be hosting in June. There was a photograph of Claire in a cream blazer laughing at something Ryan had said with the city skyline behind them. In an interview tied to the cover, Ryan was asked about his commitment to community. He spoke about wanting to bring a higher standard of living to a city that he said had been held back for too long by a certain kind of small thinking and small ambition. Claire beside him agreed. She said she had grown up around that kind of thinking and had spent her whole career escaping it. The article did not name Liam. Did not have to. 3 days after it ran, a clip from the engagement party leaked online. Somebody had filmed the moment with a phone from behind the fountain. The caption on the clip read, "Real estate queen tells barbecue boyfriend his place." Racked up 2 million views in 48 hours. Comments under the clip celebrated Claire as honest and ambitious. Liam in the glass tower in Manhattan watched the clip once on his phone late at night with the city dark outside the window. Then he set the phone face down on the desk and went back to reading a quarterly report. He never called her. He never called anyone. He went to work. The press conference came 6 weeks into the 90 days. It was a major industry event at the World Congress Center in Atlanta, organized by the Southeast Commercial Real Estate Association, the kind of gathering where the city's biggest developers announced their next moves, and the financial press came down from New York to listen. Ryan Sterling was scheduled to deliver the keynote. He was going to announce a $1.20 $2 billion mixed-use development on the west side of the city, a project his family firm had spent 2 years assembling. Claire was sitting in the 3rd row when the lights came up. She wore a dark green dress and the diamond ring Ryan had given her. The moderator, the executive director of the association, walked to the podium to introduce the keynote. But before she did, she said she wanted to take a moment to welcome a new figure to the regional industry. A man whose company had quietly become the single largest commercial landholder in the Southeast over the last decade, and who had recently taken over as chairman. He said his name. She asked him to stand from the back of the room. Liam stood up. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him. Now he walked to the front. Claire did not see him until he was halfway down the aisle. And when she did, her hand closed on the program in her lap so hard the paper folded in half. He did not look at her as he passed. He stepped up onto the stage, shook the moderator's hand and turned to face the room. The moderator said his title, Chairman Sterling Horizon Group. The room went very still. The financial reporters in the press section understood the name first. Sterling Horizon Group had been a quiet giant for decades, owned by a man almost nobody in the industry had met, with a real estate portfolio that included buildings the Sterling Group leased space in. The 2 companies had no relationship. The shared word in their names was a coincidence that had embarrassed Ryan's father once at a charity dinner and had never been spoken of since. Liam thanked the moderator. He said he would not speak long because he was here to listen. He said he had spent most of his life on the other side of rooms like this one, cooking food for the people who sat in the front rows, and he intended to remember that for as long as he was in this job. He sat down in the front row 2 seats from Claire without looking at her. When Ryan walked to the podium for his keynote, the polite confusion in his face was visible from the back of the room. He delivered his remarks. He announced the $1.2 billion project. He spoke about partnerships and vision. At the end of his keynote, he asked the moderator on impulse if Liam would like to say a word about the project since Sterling Horizon was one of the underlying landowners on the parcel. The moderator looked at Liam. So did Ryan. So did Claire. Liam stood up. He walked to the podium. He said the project was a good one. He said his company looked forward to seeing how the partnership developed. He had nothing further to add. Then he walked back to his seat. He never looked at Claire even once. What happened next was the moment that would be replayed on financial news segments for the rest of the week. The most powerful men in the room watched him as he sat down. 2 of them, men who had never spoken to Ryan as equals, stood up to shake Liam's hand. Then 3 more stood. Then a row of them. Within a minute, half the room was on its feet. Ryan was still standing at the podium. Claire had not moved at all. Her hand was still closed on the folded program. A reporter near the back who had filmed the engagement party clip 6 weeks earlier was now filming this one. The caption on this clip posted that afternoon read, "The barbecue chef, nobody invited, owns the room." That night in a private dining room at the St. Egregious, 11 men who had laughed at the engagement party 6 weeks earlier asked Liam if he would consider letting them buy into his next acquisition. He thanked them. He told them he was not raising outside capital. He paid for everyone's dinner without comment. The flattery came in waves after that. Invitations to clubs Liam had never heard of arrived by courier. Letters from boards offering directorships. A senator from Tennessee called personally to express his admiration. Claire's mother, who had once told Liam at a Christmas dinner in 2017 that her daughter would never marry beneath her station, sent a handwritten card asking if he might come to brunch. Liam answered none of them. He worked. He learned the company. And more than he wanted to admit, he started to enjoy the silence that fell over rooms when he walked in. It was Howard Bell who said something. They were in the car coming back from a site visit in Charleston. Howard had served Walter for 19 years and had not particularly liked him. He said without looking over that the last 6 weeks had been the easiest he had ever had at the company because Liam still listened and because Liam had not yet started believing the things people now said about him. He said that the day Liam started believing them, he would lose the company faster than he had inherited it. Liam said nothing. He thought about that conversation for the rest of the night. Ryan Sterling did not call. Ryan Sterling investigated. He hired a private firm out of New York to assemble a full background file on Liam Carter. The file came back thin. Widower, small business owner, no criminal history, no political donations, no prior connection to Walter Carter that anyone could document beyond a single Christmas visit. The firm flagged, however, that the proposed West Side development depended on 3 separate land parcels and that 2 of those parcels were owned by subsidiaries of Sterling Horizon Group. Without those parcels, the project could not move forward. Without the project, the Sterling Group's financing, which had been structured against expected revenues from the development, would collapse inside of 90 days. Ryan read the report twice. He understood by the end of the second reading that Liam Carter could end his family's company with a single phone call. He did not tell Claire. He told her instead that there were a few small complications, that the financing structure needed adjusting, and that nothing was wrong. She did not press. She had been distracted for weeks. Her assistants had noticed her watching the press conference clip on her phone in the backseat of cars. She had not slept well in 23 days. Claire came to the tower in Manhattan on the 73rd day. She did not call ahead. She gave her name at the security desk in the lobby and asked to see the chairman. Liam was in his office. The receptionist on the executive floor told him a Miss Whitmore was downstairs. He sat at his desk for a long time before he told the receptionist to send her up. She walked into his office in a black coat, her hair down, no ring on her finger. She stood in the middle of the room and looked at him across the desk. She told him she had been wrong. She told him she had been afraid and that fear had made her cruel, and that she had spent every day since the engagement party trying to forget what she had said to him in that garden. Her voice broke when she added that Ryan's company was in trouble. She knew Liam had the power to save it or to end it. And she was not here to ask him to save it. She was here to ask him to take her back. Liam looked at her across the room and he felt for the first time since he had signed Daniel Hayes's documents the full weight of what he had become. He could destroy them. He could save them. He could do either thing. And Claire would tell herself for the rest of her life that she had been right to come to this office. The 90-day clock was almost out. The decision was no longer about money. The decision was about whether the man who had stood in the garden that night still existed inside the man who now sat behind this desk. He told her he needed 24 hours. She nodded. She left. He sat alone in the office until the city outside the window went dark. Liam did not sleep that night. He sat in the office until the sky over the city went from black to gray. He thought about Claire's face when she had asked him to take her back, and about the way she had not asked him anything else, not how he was, not where he had been, not what the last 73 days had done to him. He thought about Ryan, who had stood at the podium 6 weeks ago and announced a project he could not finish without Liam's signature. And he thought about Walter Carter, who had watched him from a distance for a long time before deciding he would be the one to inherit the weight. He read the letter from his uncle again at 4 in the morning. The paper had softened along the creases from being carried in his coat pocket for 73 days. He read the part about staying kind when he was rich, and then he read the part about how Walter had never made his peace with the world he had built. He understood for the first time what his uncle had meant by that line. Walter had built the company. The company had built someone Walter no longer recognized in the mirror. The letter was not a will. It was a warning. At 7 he called Daniel Hayes. He told him the meeting that would decide everything would happen the following Monday at the company's regional office in Atlanta. He asked Daniel to be there. Daniel said he had been planning to be there anyway. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. By 9:30 the parking deck of the Atlanta Tower was full of black cars. Word had moved through the industry over the weekend. Ryan Sterling had quietly informed his board that a single counterparty held the future of the West Side development. He had not named Liam. He did not need to. The men who had stood up at the press conference to shake Liam's hand had stayed up late on Sunday night talking to one another. By Monday morning, half the senior leadership of commercial real estate in the Southeast was either in the building or waiting by a phone. Ryan arrived at 9:50. He came alone in a dark suit carrying a single folder. He sat down in the conference room and did not open it. Claire was not with him. She had asked the night before if she could come. He had told her no in a voice she had never heard him use, and she had not asked again. Liam walked into the conference room at 10 o'clock exactly. Howard Bell came in behind him and closed the door. Daniel Hayes was already seated at the far end of the table with a yellow legal pad in front of him and a black pen resting on top of it. He never wrote anything down. He was not there to record. He was there to watch. Liam sat across from Ryan. He did not offer his hand. Ryan did not extend his. The room was quiet for almost a minute before Liam spoke. He said he understood that Ryan's company had structured its financing against the West Side project and that without the 2 parcels Sterling Horizon controlled, the project could not move forward and the financing would collapse. He said his lawyers had confirmed all of it. He said he could end the Sterling Group as a going concern in the time it took to sign a single document. Ryan did not argue. He nodded once in a voice that was steadier than Liam had expected. He said he understood that as well. He said he had not come to negotiate the facts. He had come to ask what Liam was going to do. Liam looked at him for a long moment across the table. He thought about the garden and Claire's small hard smile and the laughter that had started and then stopped. He thought about Ryan standing at the podium 6 weeks ago talking about small thinking and small ambition. He thought about $140 billion and how easy it would be to make this man understand in the next 30 seconds exactly what it felt like to stand outside the partitions. Then he thought about Walter Carter and Howard Bell and the car coming back from Charleston and the man he had been in the kitchen on Edgewood Avenue before any of this had started. He told Ryan he was going to sign the parcels over at the original price they had been valued at 3 years ago before the market had run on a clean transfer with no conditions and no leverage. He said Sterling Horizon would do the deal because it was a good deal for the city and because the city needed the housing and the jobs the project would produce. He said he wasn't doing it as a favor to Ryan. He wasn't doing it for any reason that had anything to do with Ryan at all. Then he told Ryan that after the transfer closed, Sterling Horizon would not do business with the Sterling Group again while Ryan ran it. He did not say it as a threat. He said it the way a man returns something he has been holding for someone else and walks away. Ryan did not move for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thinner than it had been before. He said he understood. He said he would have done worse if their positions had been reversed. He told Liam he was sorry, and he said it the way a man says it when he does not yet know how much he is sorry for. After Ryan left the room, Howard Bell stayed at the door. He had watched the entire meeting without speaking. He said in the quiet that followed that he had not been sure until that moment what kind of man he was working for. He said he was sure now. Liam said nothing in return. He stood by the window for a long time looking down at the parking deck where the black cars were already beginning to leave. Ryan stepped into the hallway and did not stop walking until he reached the elevator. Claire was standing by the window at the end of the corridor. He had come after all. Ryan, walking past her, never looked up. She crossed the hallway when Liam came out of the conference room. She told him she had heard. She did not specify how. She told him she did not understand. She said he could have ended Ryan's family, that any other man in this building would have done it without thinking twice, that she would have stood by him through every minute of it. She asked him why he had not. Liam looked at her in the morning light coming through the window. He thought with a kind of distant clarity that he had loved her for almost 10 years and that it had taken him almost 10 years to see her completely. He told her she had answered her own question. He told her she would have stood by him through it, and that was the difference between the man she thought she had come back to and the man who actually existed. He told her he was not coming back. He said it without anger and without the particular kind of cruelty he had spent the last 73 days choosing not to use. He wished her well, and he meant that too, in the way a man can mean something he no longer has to feel anything about. Then he walked past her down the hall to the elevator. Daniel Hayes was waiting in the lobby. They walked together to the parking deck. Daniel had decided days earlier what he was going to put in his final report. He had been a lawyer for 31 years, and he had learned somewhere in the middle of his career that the way a man behaves when he thinks no one is watching is the same as the way he behaves when he knows someone is. Liam Carter had behaved the same on day one as he was behaving now. The report had been written before the meeting. Daniel had only needed to confirm it. At the car. He told Liam the 90 days were not yet up, but the inheritance was secure. He told him the foundations were already aware the assets would not be passing to them. He told him the rest of the clock was in his judgment, a formality. He shook Liam's hand. He left. That evening in his hotel suite, Liam read the letter from his uncle one final time. He did not know whether Walter Carter would have considered the day a success or a failure. He thought eventually that Walter had not asked the question that way. The question had only ever been whether the man reading the letter was still the man who could read it. The next morning, Liam left the hotel and drove east across the city to Edgewood Avenue. The sign outside Carter had been touched up. Maggie had hired a kid to repaint it on her own initiative. The booths were still vinyl. The smell inside the walls was the same. He took off the suit jacket and hung it on a hook by the back door. He tied on an apron. He started the brisket. Maggie watched him for a long moment from the front counter, then went back to wiping down the espresso machine without saying anything. Maggie had grown the staff by 2 while he was away, a line cook from a closed restaurant downtown and a boozer she had vouched for personally. The books, she told him, were the cleanest they had ever been. She never asked where he had gone. He never told her. Some of it she had figured out from the news. The rest of it she did not need to know. Sterling Horizon Group signed over the parcels at the price Liam had named, and the West Side development moved forward. The story moved slowly through the financial press over the summer. The inheritance, the 90-day condition, the parcel signed over at 3-year-old prices. The way Ryan Sterling had walked out of the conference room without saying anything to anybody for the rest of the day. A long piece in the Wall Street Journal ran in August. Liam declined to be interviewed. He read the piece once and put it in a drawer. Ryan stepped down as principal of the Sterling Group 6 months later, and the company was restructured under new leadership. Claire Whitmore closed Whitmore Properties the following spring and moved to Charleston. She gave no interviews. The clip from the engagement party was eventually taken down. Liam continued to run Sterling Horizon Group from the glass tower in Manhattan when he was needed and from a small office above Carter's when he was not. He flew commercial. He kept the same 2 suits. He installed Howard Bell as chief executive and pushed most of the day-to-day decisions down into the divisions the way Walter Carter had done in his last years. The senior officers who had laughed at him in his first board meeting were given a choice when their contracts came up for renewal. Stay and report to Howard or leave with full severance. 3 stayed. 9 left. Carl Bradford was not among the 3. What Liam did with the rest of the money was the part that eventually made the news again in a different way. He established 2 funds out of Sterling Horizon's foundation arm. The first was a low-interest loan program for small restaurants in cities where rent was running ahead of revenue. It made loans without collateral on the strength of 3 years of tax returns and a conversation with the owner. The second was a hardship fund for service workers and small business owners trying to keep their lives together after the loss of a spouse. It paid out quietly and did not publish names. He did not put his name on the funds. He did not put Walter Carter's name on them either. He gave them the name of the street where he had opened his first restaurant. The Edgewood Foundation made its first round of grants the following winter. By the end of the year, it had touched the lives of 900 people in 11 cities, and almost none of them knew who had signed the check. On Saturday nights when he was in town, Liam still worked the grill at Carter's. He wore the same smoke-stained apron. He pulled the brisket from the steel barrel at the same time he always had. The line at the door on most Saturdays stretched halfway down the block. He took no reservations. He served everyone in the order they arrived. A reporter from the New York Financial Press came down once in the second year and asked him off the record whether he ever thought about Claire Whitmore. Liam said no. He told the reporter the man she had spoken to in the garden that night had not been him. And the man she had come to see in Manhattan on the 73rd day had not been him either. He was not angry about it anymore. He was only sorry sometimes for both of them. The journalists who came to write about him in the years after the story broke mostly wrote the same thing, that the richest man in Atlanta was the one nobody recognized in his own kitchen. A man is not measured by what he can take from the people who took from him. He is measured by what he refuses to take when he finally has the power to take everything. The man who walks out of the kitchen the same as he walked in is the only kind of rich man worth becoming.